Every Friday morning, the same man would board my dad's bus, hand him a crisp $50 bill for a 95-cent fare, and smirk. He did it week after week, knowing full well it was a nightmare to break that kind of note on a crowded morning route. But what he didn't know was that my dad had been quietly planning something. And when the day came, that smug businessman got exactly what he'd been asking for, down to the last cent. My dad drove public buses all through the 1990s. He loved the job, the early mornings, the smell of diesel, the regulars who'd wave to him as they stepped on. To him, it wasn't just a job, it was part of the rhythm of the city. He knew every pothole, every stoplight that stayed red too long, and every passenger who'd make his day a little brighter. But there was one passenger who made his mornings miserable. Every Friday, without fail, this man would board the bus in a sharp suit, the kind of guy who looked like he ironed his confidence along with his shirt. He'd stroll on like he owned the place, barely making eye contact, and hand over a $50 note for a 95-cent fare. Now, if you've ever worked a cash handling job, you know that's the worst kind of move. Morning routes meant smaller change floats, maybe $20 in mixed coins and notes to get through the early runs. Breaking a $50 was a nightmare, but this businessman didn't care. At first, Dad thought it was a one-off. Maybe the guy forgot smaller bills. It happens. But then came the next Friday, and the one after that. And every single time, it was the same $50 note, the same smug little half-smile, the same inconvenience dropped like a stone in a pond, rippling chaos through Dad's morning. Dad asked him politely at first, "Mate, any chance you could bring smaller change next time? I don't always have enough to break a 50. The businessman barely looked up. "Company gives me these," he muttered. "It's all I've got." That was a lie. Dad could see the wallet, packed with smaller bills. But the man just didn't care. It wasn't about the money. It was about the power trip. See, some people get a weird thrill out of making others bend. It's a subtle kind of cruelty. Not enough to call out, but enough to remind you who's above you in their eyes. And week after week, my dad had to stand there, smile through it, and count out the change coin by coin while passengers behind him sighed impatiently. He told me once, it wasn't the 50, it was the smirk. That smirk that said, "You have to serve me. You can't say no." But Dad had patience, the quiet kind that only comes from years of early mornings and late finishes. And one Friday, when that 50 hit his palm again, he decided, "All right, mate, you win for now. But next time, I'll be ready." Over the next few weeks, Dad started collecting. Every time someone paid with coins, especially 1-cent pieces, he'd tuck them away into a small tin in his drawer at home. Now, back in the 90s, 1-cent coins were still around, small, copper, and mostly forgotten. Nobody liked using them. Nobody liked counting them, which made them perfect for what he had in mind. He'd come home from his shift, toss his jacket on the chair, and empty his pockets. You could hear it from the next room, the metallic clink, clink, clink as another handful of tiny coins joined the collection. It took weeks, then months, but slowly that tin grew heavier. Mom asked him once what he was doing, and he just smiled. "Building patience," he said. "What I love most about this story is how measured it was." Dad didn't lash out. He didn't yell or argue. He didn't even complain to management. He just waited. That's the thing about real revenge, the kind that hits deep. It's never loud. It's quiet, deliberate, patient. Because revenge isn't about hurting someone. It's about restoring balance. It's about saying, you don't get to treat people like they don't matter. And when that tin was finally full, heavy enough that you could barely lift it with one hand, Dad knew the day had come. That Friday morning felt like any other. The hum of the bus warming up, the smell of coffee in a paper cup. The first few regulars hopping on with sleepy smiles and exact change. And then, right on time, came him, the businessman. Same briefcase, same tailored suit, same faint cologne. He stepped up, pulled out that same crisp $50 note, and handed it over with that same little smirk. And my dad, bless him, smiled right back. "Ah, perfect. he said. Got your change ready today? The man blinked, confused for half a second, until Dad reached under the counter and pulled out a small cloth bag. He placed it on the counter with a satisfying thud. It was heavy, heavier than it looked. Dad untied the top just a little so the businessman could peek inside, and there it was, $49.05 in 1-cent pieces. That's 4,905 coins. Dad said you could see the moment it registered on his face, the disbelief, then the dawning horror. The businessman stammered, You can't be serious." Dad, still smiling, said, "Exact change, sir. Just how you like it." A few passengers nearby snorted. Someone at the back let out a low whistle. The businessman looked around, realizing every pair of eyes on the bus was watching him squirm. He tried to argue. "I can't carry this. I'm not taking this." Dad stayed calm. "You handed me a 50 for a 95-cent fare. That means 49.05 change. This is 49.05. Legal tender, all accounted for. You're welcome to count it if you like." The man's jaw tightened. He opened the bag, looked at the pile of coins, and realized there was no way to win. If he refused, he'd look petty. If he complained, he'd have to admit he'd been doing this for months. And if he accepted, well, he'd be lugging around 5 kilos of copper all day. So he did what bullies hate most. He took the bag, and the bus, for the first time in months, felt lighter. Passengers were grinning. Someone even clapped quietly as the man shuffled to his seat, clutching his little bag of karma. The following week, Dad waited. Friday morning came. Same route, same time. But this time, the businessman didn't get on. He never saw him again. Maybe he found another route. Maybe he finally realized that power trips aren't free rides. Either way, my dad had made his point, politely, precisely, perfectly. And he didn't brag about it. He didn't even tell the story until years later, over a family dinner when we were sharing stories about petty revenge. He said it so casually, like it was no big deal. But to me, it said everything about who he was. Patient, clever, fair. The kind of man who believed respect was earned, not demanded. When I think about that story now, it feels almost symbolic. Because it's not really about coins or buses or $50 notes. It's about dignity, about how sometimes the best revenge isn't to hurt someone back. It has to remind them that decency still matters. That no matter how small your job, how simple your role, you deserve respect. And when people forget that, well, sometimes the universe hands them a bag full of pennies. If you enjoyed this story as much as I did, hit like. It tells the algorithm this tale of poetic justice deserves to be heard. Subscribe for more stories where good people quietly, cleverly get their due. And drop a comment below. If you could hand someone their karma in exact change, how would you do it? Or